said the Allied bombardment was a spectacular affair, but the Russians had used those wasted weeks to very good effect.
From 6 until 9 a.m. they were hard at it. As fast as our men could load and fire, it was ding-dong hard fighting. At 9 a.m, one of the French magazines went up with a crash. As far as we could see, it was all fair give and take. Sergeant Timothy Gowing.
The opening bombardment failed to demolish Sebastopol. Now the initiative swung to the Russians. They decided to counterattack before the Allies could secure their base at Balaclava. Early on the morning of October the 25th, a Russian army of 30,000 descended from the north. Their aim was to cut the line of communication between the siege forces round Sebastopol and the supply base at Balaclava. Fanny Jubilee was asleep on board ship when her husband sent word.
A note was put into my hands from Henry. It ran thus: "The Battle of Balaclava has begun and promises to be a hot one. Lose no time, but come as quickly as you can. Do not wait for breakfast."
Between these woods in the foreground and the hills at the back is the Valley of Death, where the Battle of Balaclava was fought. At dawn, the Russian army launched a surprise attack on Balaclava's first line of defense, Allied gun positions manned by some 900 Turkish soldiers. The Turks held out as long as they could before abandoning their guns and fleeing towards the port. Galloping the other way came Fanny Jubilee, heading for the sound of gunfire.
The road was almost blocked by flying Turks, vociferating "Ship Johnny, ship Johnny," while others came along laden with pots, kettles, arms and plunder. The Russians were by this time in possession of 3 batteries from which the Turks had fled.
What's often forgotten is that those Turks, probably less than 1,000 men, had been holding out for a good 2 hours against immensely superior Russian forces. Men like Lord Raglan, the British commander, Russell, the Times correspondent, arrived on the battlefield only at the end of the Turks' 2-hour resistance. And so the initial impression was one simply of the Turks running away.
Lord Raglan and his staff climbed the hill above the valley to get a better view of the action. They could see the next line of defence guarding the port of Balaclava, the 93rd Highlanders, commanded by Sir Colin Campbell. He formed them up into a thin red line and gave them their orders as an advanced force of Russian cavalry rode towards them.
Men, remember there is no retreat from here. You must die where you stand.
William Howard Russell watched from above, waiting for the Russians to make a move.
The silence is oppressive. Between the cannon bursts, one can hear the champing of bits and the clink of sabres in the valley below. The Russians drew breath for a moment and then in one grand line dashed at the Highlanders. The ground flies beneath their horses' feet. Gathering speed at every stride, they dash on towards that thin red streak tipped with a line of steel.
The thin red line had held. The Russian cavalry retreated, and on the hillside the onlookers cheered the Highlanders. But it was a brief respite. The main force of Russian cavalry was still advancing towards Balaclava. Lord Raglan turned to the Heavy Brigade under the command of General Sir James Scarlett. Scarlett had never been in a battle before in his life. Now he ordered his 300 men to charge uphill straight into 2,000 enemy cavalry. The artist who painted this battle tidied up the scene for the public back home, but William Howard Russell could see it was a vicious struggle.
God help them, they are lost, was the exclamation of more than one man. By sheer steel and sheer courage, Enniskillen and Scott were winning their desperate way right through the enemy's squadrons. Then, with irresistible force, like one bolt from a bow, the rest of the heavy brigade rushed at the remnants of the first line of the enemy, went through it as though it were made of pasteboard, and put them to utter rout.
The British had done well to have held off such a large Russian force. The valley was strewn with the casualties of battle, and both sides may have been ready to call it a day. But fate had one more cruel card to play. Lord Raglan could see the Russian army towing away the guns abandoned by the Turks. To lose the guns was tantamount to losing the battle. Someone had to stop them. He sent an order to the Light Brigade, which would send them charging in the wrong direction, towards death and immortality.
The opening of the Churchill Museum and the 40th anniversary of his death, we're sponsoring a special series of lectures. For your chance to win tickets to one of them, visit uktvhistory.co.uk or press red on your digital satellite remote.